Maps show us the world we think we understand. Borders, oceans, cities, paths carved by those who walked before us. But beyond those lines, beyond the places we can point to, there are stories that slip through our fingers, mysteries that challenge what we believe is possible. My name is Jishnu Ganguly, and you're listening to Where the Map Ends, a podcast where we dive into the unsolved, the unexplained, and the unsettling. For our very first episode, we're beginning with a disappearance that shook the entire world. A commercial flight, 239 people, and vanishing so complete it feels almost impossible. This is the story of MH370, the flight that took off and never came home. Welcome to Where the Map Ends. Midnight at Kuala Lumpur International Airport has a strange kind of calm. It's not silent, it's waiting, like the world is holding its breath between yesterday and tomorrow. And on the night of March 8th, 2014, the airport looked completely ordinary. Bright, busy, familiar. No one, not a single person in that terminal, knew that the next few hours would become one of the greatest mysteries in aviation history. Among the many passengers moving towards their gates, 239 people approached gate C1, preparing to board Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370. They came from different countries, spoke different languages, had different lives. Families going on holiday, workers returning home, students restarting college, a group of artists, a few tourists, and children. Some too young to even understand what a plane is. To the world, they would soon become numbers. But tonight, they were real people, with real stories, heading towards Beijing. The cockpit crew was led by Captain Zahari Ahmed Shah, 53 years old, calm, respected, and experienced. Over 18,000 hours of flying. That's more time in the sky than most people spend in their offices in an entire lifetime. Beside him sat First Officer Fariq Abdul Hamid, 27 years old, young but promising. On one of his final training flights, they weren't strangers. They knew each other, and by all official records, that night, everything began perfectly normal. At 12:41 a.m., MH370 slowly pushed back from the gate. The Boeing 777-200ER, a massive, dependable machine, taxied towards the runway. The 777 is considered one of the safest aircrafts ever built. In 20 years, hardly any had crashed. It was designed to survive lightning, engine failures, turbulence, almost anything. At 12:42, the aircraft lifted off, climbing into the darkness over Malaysia. Inside, passengers settled into their seats. Blankets were unfolded, lights dimmed. Some people slept, some watched movies. Some texted last messages to their families before switching their phones off. A typical night flight. Nothing extraordinary. At 1:19 a.m., the flight crossed from Malaysian airspace to Vietnamese control. This is where pilots usually make a simple call. Good night, Malaysian 369, or contact Ho Chi Minh control. But MH370 transmitted good night, Malaysian 370. The voice was calm, steady, routine. Those 9 words would become the most analyzed radio transmissions in history. Because after that, MH370 went silent. The moment after those last words, the plane's transponder switched off. The transponder is a device that tells air traffic control your altitude, your speed, your direction, your exact position. Without it, a plane becomes invisible. Not gone, not destroyed, but hidden from a civilian radar. And this wasn't a malfunction. Transponders rarely fail, and even if they do, the backup systems kick in. To go dark completely, someone has to turn it off. Minutes later, something even stranger happened. Instead of continuing towards Vietnam, MH370 turned around, not drifting, not struggling, not falling. It made a clean, precise, professional turn as if guided by a steady hand, back across the Malaysian peninsula. Imagine watching a car take a perfect U turn with no hesitation. That's what happened. Radar showed the plane heading southwest, flying over the Strait of Malacca, all without announcing itself to any control tower. At this point, the world still had no idea. To air traffic control, the plane simply stopped talking. From here, the story gets even stranger. Malaysian military radar, which was checking its logs hours later, showed the plane traveling steadily at around 30,000 feet. It wasn't crashing, it wasn't in distress, it was flying. MH370 passed Penang Island. Some investigators believe the plane made a slight dip, as if circling or descending. A maneuver some describe as the pilot's last look at its hometown. But we don't know if this is true. All we know is MH370 was under control. At 2:22 a.m. over the Andaman Sea, military radar saw MH370 for the last time. After that, the plane left radar range completely. It had now become a silent aircraft in one of the quietest night skies in the world. Here's what most people don't know. MH370 didn't crash after leaving radar. It kept flying for hours. But we only learned this much later from a British satellite company called Inmarsat. Every hour, the plane system sent a simple digital handshake to a satellite orbiting above Earth. Not a message, not a distress call, just a ping. I'm here. I'm still functioning. I'm still flying. And based on those pings, we now know MH370 flew roughly until 8:19 a.m. That's almost 7 hours after it disappeared from radar. 7 hours. Two oceans crossed, thousands of kilometers away from anyone we expected to be. By sunrise, MH370 was already somewhere over the emptiest stretch of the Indian Ocean, one of the most remote places on the planet. Back in Beijing airport, families waited at the terminal gate. The arrival on board kept shifting. On time, delayed, contact lost, and finally missing. People cried. People screamed. Others stood in shock, clutching their phones. In Kuala Lumpur, authorities held emergency meetings. The media began breaking news alerts. Countries started calling Malaysia for details, but there was no details. Because the truth was, even the people in charge had no idea where the aircraft was. In the age of satellites, GPS, smartphones, military service, and global communication, a plane the size of a Boeing 777 had vanished. It did not crash in front of witnesses, not exploded in midair, no left floating debris, just disappeared, becoming a ghost flight carrying 239 souls into a silence that still echoes today. This brings us to the part of the story where the world launches one of the largest search operations in human history and yet finds almost nothing. When a plane vanishes, the world reacts fast. Rescue teams, helicopters, naval ships, satellite recon, investigators, everyone moves. But with MH370, the confusion began immediately. At 2:40 a.m., Malaysia Airlines officially told the authorities that they had lost contact with MH370. But even then, they had no idea where to look. Why? Because the plane wasn't where it should have been. Vietnam thought it was in Malaysian airspace. Malaysia thought it was in Vietnamese airspace. Neighbors like Thailand and Indonesia didn't want to reveal their military radar capabilities. So everyone waited for someone else to confirm. So for crucial early hours, search teams were scanning the South China Sea because that's where the plane was supposed to be. But MH370 wasn't there. It was already thousands of kilometers away, flying silently into the Indian Ocean. As dawn broke, ships from Vietnam, Malaysia, China, the Philippines, and the US Navy began sweeping the South China Sea. Aircraft carriers, helicopters, sonar teams, patrol aircraft, hundreds of experts, they searched and searched for something that wasn't even there. Only later, when the military radar logs were checked, did Malaysia finally admit the plane actually turned around and flew across the entire peninsula and then kept going. This revelation changed everything. The search moved from the state of Malacca to the Andaman Sea. But by the time search teams reached there, the plane had flown far beyond. Here's where the mystery deepens. A British satellite company, Inmarsat, noticed something strange. MH370 had been communicating with the satellite for hours after everyone thought it crashed. Not voice messages, not location data, just a quiet digital handshake. A ping, a simple, I'm on, I'm here, I still exist. From these pings, investigators discovered something world changing. They plotted MH370's last possible positions, a curved line stretching across the Indian Ocean. This line became known as the Seventh Arc, a ghostly boundary representing the last moment the plane said anything to the world. Experts analyzed the ping, the timing, the Doppler shifts, the flight engine logics. Almost all the data pointed to one direction. MH370 turned south and flew straight into the emptiest part of the Indian Ocean. No islands, no ships, no radar, just thousands of kilometers of nothingness. This was shocking, because flying south meant the pilots didn't attempt a landing, no one contacted anyone, no distress signal was sent, the aircraft was under control for hours, and then at the end, when the fuel ran out, it simply descended into the sea. But this is only the theory, not everyone agrees. The southern Indian Ocean is brutal. Waves the height of buildings, storms that can flip ships, no cell towers, no commercial flights, no nearby islands. Imagine searching for a phone in the world's biggest washing machine. Still, the world tried. Australia led the operation with help from Malaysia, China, France, US Navy, Japan, UK, New Zealand, and India for 1046 days. Search teams mapped underwater mountains, volcanoes, deep trenches, areas never explored by humans before. They used sonar drones, deep sea robots, underwater cameras, satellite drift analysis, ocean current simulations, and after scanning 120,000 square kilometers of area, they found nothing. Then came the debris. A year later, in July 2015, a strange piece washed up on the shores of Reunion Island near Africa. It was a flaperon, a part of a Boeing 777 wing, and it matched MH370. Then more pieces appeared in Mozambique, Madagascar, Mauritius, Tanzania, South Africa. Smooth, ocean tumbled, sun bleached, silent messengers from a plane that shouldn't have disappeared. These fragments proved one thing: the plane did crash into the Indian Ocean. But where? Nobody knows. After nearly 3 years, the official search ended. Authorities said, "We have run out of places to look." Families protested, investigators argued, conspiracy theories exploded online. Finally, a private company, named Ocean Infinity searched again in 2018 using better technology. Even they found nothing. And that brings us to the haunting reality. A Boeing 777 flew for hours, sent signals, followed a route, crashed into an ocean, and yet remains unfound. When the world cannot find answers, it begins to search for explanations. And when explanations fall short, it begins to build theories. MH370 is one of those rare mysteries where every theory feels possible but none feel complete. Tonight we dive into the major theories, the scientific, the logical, the emotional, and the ones born from the shadows. The simplest explanation is that something broke. A fire, a sudden decompression, an electrical failure, a cockpit emergency. But here's the problem. If MH370 had a catastrophic failure, a fire, an explosion, or a structural break, the pilots would have done exactly what pilots are trained to do: turn towards the nearest airport and send a distress call. But MH370 made a long, controlled turn, crossed an entire peninsula, followed airways, flew for nearly 7 more hours, and never transmitted a single message. No debris field was found in the South China Sea, no oil slick, nothing. A disaster big enough to cripple communication, but small enough to allow 7 hours of flight? Possible, but extremely unlikely. One idea suggests that the plane lost oxygen. Maybe the air system failed, maybe the cabin depressurized. Inside, passengers would feel tired, confused, then unconscious. The cockpit crew too. In this version, MH370 became a ghost plane, flying on autopilot until fuel ran out. This explains no communication, silent flight, and the straight path into the Indian Ocean, but it fails to explain the series of deliberate manual turns, the transponder being turned off, and the altitude changes tracked on radar. Autopilot doesn't switch off communication systems, people do. This is the theory people whisper about but rarely say out loud. Some investigators believe that the path MH370 took, the turn, the route over Malaysia, the glide into remote ocean, was too precise to be an accident. However, no official report blames any individual. No evidence proves intent. No message, no note, no pattern of behavior. Investigators stress that this is only a possibility, not a conclusion. This theory exists simply because the flight path looks like someone was guiding the plane with a purpose, but without evidence, it remains a theory, not the truth. Hijackings happen. It's a reality of aviation. One popular idea was that someone stormed into the cockpit or manipulated the crew. But hijackers usually make demands, they contact authorities, they want attention. MH370 stayed silent. There is no record of struggle, no calls from passengers, no messages from crew. And there's a bigger problem. The route MH370 took did not seem to be heading to any destination a hijacker would want. A hijacker wants leverage, power, and audience. A path into the southern Indian Ocean suggests neither. Some people even suggested remote hijacking, someone on the ground taking control electronically. But modern aircraft simply doesn't allow remote takeover. So in this theory, it's while dramatic, it doesn't fit the evidence. Whenever something disappears, people look to those with power. Some believe MH370 may have crossed a military zone and may have been mistaken for a threat. This theory suggests a misunderstanding, a mistaken shootdown, and a cover up afterward. But here's the issue: no country has evidence of such an event. No radar logs were destroyed, no missile detection was recorded, no debris pattern matches a mid-air explosion, and a cover up of this scale involving multiple nations would be nearly impossible. Still, people speculate because the Indian Ocean is surrounded by military testing zones, but speculation is not proof. Cargo fires can be deadly. Lithium batteries have caused crashes before. If a fire broke out, the pilots might have tried to turn back. That would explain the first turn, but once again, it doesn't explain why the communication stopped, how the plane kept flying for hours, and why no distress signal was sent, and also how the plane followed a calm, stable path. A severe fire would have disabled the plane much earlier and caused a rapid crash, not a 7-hour journey, and a slow fire would have given the pilots time to radio. This theory struggles to fill the gaps. Some oceanographers believe MH370 did not crash in a violent dive, but rather glided into the ocean in a controlled descent. Why does this matter? Because a controlled ditching would keep the plane in one piece longer, allowing it to sink more intact and leaving almost no floating debris. This would explain why so few fragments were found. Large parts like the fuselage remain missing. The underwater search found nothing, but this theory implies that someone was flying the plane until the very end. If so, who and why? Some fringe theories suggest the plane landed on a remote runway in a region like Kazakhstan, North China, Central Asia. People point to the plane's fuel range and its long radio silence. But there's no evidence. No satellite images, no runway debris, no airport logs, no survivor accounts, no radar from dozens of countries. The northern route was mathematically possible, but practically impossible. This theory gets clicks, but not facts. Some aviation experts say that the data simply isn't enough to reach a conclusion. Yes, this is an actual stance held by professionals. That the ocean is too deep, the drift patterns too complex, the radar logs incomplete, and the satellite pings too limited. They believe humanity may never fully understand what happened to MH370 unless we find the wreckage, and for now, that remains out of reach. So, which theory is the truth? That's the hardest part of this case. Every theory answers something, but no theory answers everything. MH370 is a puzzle with missing pieces, hidden pieces, and pieces we didn't know existed. And that brings us to the most haunting part of all. A modern airplane filled with people, equipped with technology, tracked by satellites and radar, simply vanished. In an era of GPS, live tracking, and instant communication, a massive aircraft disappeared, like it never existed at all. But maybe that is not why MH370 isn't just a mystery. It's a reminder of how small we truly are on a planet still filled with pieces where even the biggest things can disappear without a trace. When we talk about MH370, we talk about data, radar, pings, flight paths. But beneath all of that, there were people. 239 passengers. Fathers, mothers, children, workers on business trips, couples returning home, tourists excited for adventure, and behind them were thousands of family members waiting. At 6:30 a.m., when the families arrived at Beijing airport, they expected to see a plane taxi in. People held flowers, banners, cameras, and then the screens changed. Flight MH370 delayed, then contact lost. At first, everybody believed it was a glitch, maybe an emergency landing, maybe a radio failure. People refreshed news channels, reloaded flight tracker apps, searched MH370 latest update every 10 seconds. They clung to one phrase the airline repeated: "We are still looking." Family members were taken to hotels, Officials came in with clipboards and silence. No answers, no informations. Many families describe that day as a blur of crying voices and unanswered questions. Where is my son? Why can't you find the plane? Is my husband alive? Is my daughter safe? But the hardest question was, where do we wait? At home? In Beijing? In Kuala Lumpur? Nobody knew. As days passed, hope began to thin. Every hour brought contradictions. Malaysia said one thing, Vietnam said another. China questioned both. The search area changed constantly. Families stayed awake all night, fearing that if they slept, they would miss news. Some were convinced their loved ones were alive. Some were terrified they were suffering. Some felt something deep, a connection, telling them something was wrong. And then, every day at noon, they gathered near the hotel lobby to hear an update. Most updates were the same two words: no discovery, no debris. On March 24th, about 2 weeks after the disappearance, Malaysia's Prime Minister walked into a press room, looked straight at the cameras, and said, MH370 ended in the southern Indian Ocean. Just like that, no wreckage, no bodies, no proof. Just satellite math and a tragic conclusion. Families collapsed. Some screamed, some fainted, some punched walls, some stared blankly as if their emotions had left their bodies. And the world realized this was not a crash. It was a mystery with human lives caught inside it. Most airplane crashes have closure, a wreckage, a report, a reason. But MH370 left only questions. Families describe it as a wound that cannot heal because it never truly closes. Parents still keep shoes, shirts, toys, school bags, waiting for a knock on the door that will never come. Spouses still sleep on one side of the bed. Children draw pictures of airplanes asking their grandparents, when is mama coming back? And no one knows what to say. In Malaysia, people held candle marches. In China, families staged sit-ins. In Australia, letters were written to the parliament. The world felt cheated. How can a modern plane vanish like a coin dropped in an ocean? People demanded transparency. More data, full radar logs, better communication. But governments gave them little. Some accused them of hiding information. Some believed there was more to the story. Some simply felt trapped between grief and confusion. The engineers searching the seabed describe MH370 as the mission that never leaves their minds. They mapped underwater mountains that had never been seen. They discovered extinct volcanoes and strange ridges, but they couldn't find the plane the size of a building. Many investigators still think about it at night. Some retired early because the emotional toll was too high. One expert said, it feels like the ocean is hiding it on purpose. The disappearance reshaped aviation. Today, planes transmit more data, live streaming of black boxes is being developed, tracking systems can't be turned off easily, internal coordination has improved, satellite monitoring is more advanced. But for the families, improvements don't bring their loved ones back. They only ask for one thing: find the plane, give us closure, let us bury our dead. And this is perhaps the hardest part to say about. Many families still don't know how to grieve. How do you mourn someone when there is no final moment? No farewell, no explanation. How do you let go when your heart tells you that they're still out there, somewhere? MH370 is not just a missing plane. It's a symbol. It's a symbol of how fragile life is, how vast the planet remains, and how mysteries still exist. Even in an age of satellites and technology, the plane vanished, but the grief did not. The family's plan became part of the story. a reminder that beneath every mystery are human beings, waiting for an answer that never arrives. When I first started researching MH370, I thought I was looking for facts, radar logs, satellite signals, technical reports, flight paths. But the deeper I went, the more I realized that MH370 isn't just a case file. It's not only an unsolved mystery, it's not just a vanished airplane. It's a crack in our belief that the world is fully understood. In school, we learned that satellites watch everything, that air traffic controllers track every sky, that technology keeps us safe. But MH370 reminds us that there are still places on this planet where a plane, a metal giant, can slip into silence and fade beyond our instruments. It reminds us that even now, in the age of GPS and live streams, there are shadows where truth can disappear. It haunts us because this mystery feels personal. We board flights with the quiet trust that we will land safely. We look at maps believing every corner is accounted for. We scroll on our phones believing nothing can go untracked. But MH370 took those beliefs and challenged them. It forced us to confront the uncomfortable truth that certainly is sometimes an illusion. That there are moments when the sky closes its fists around a story and refuses to open it. MH370 left no mayday call, no final words, no last transmission, only a trail of faint pings, like a heartbeat in the dark, fading, fading, and then gone. In the physical world, a plane vanished, but in the emotional world, something larger disappeared. A confidence in knowing how things end. Some mysteries end in a courtroom, some in a confession, some with the final discovery, but MH370 remains open, an unfinished sentence in thousands of hearts. There are families who still set an extra plate at dinner for someone who will never walk through the door. There are parents who wake up their child from the dreams expecting to see them and then remember reality in painful slow motion. There are children who grew up believing their missing parent is just somewhere far away. This is the human cost of an unanswered question. It left behind a deeper respect for the ocean's power, a realization of our technological limits, a global ache for closure, a sense of humility in the face of the unknown. MH370 isn't just a mystery, it's a reminder that not every story ends neatly. And that brings us here to this very podcast, to the point where the map ends and the unknown begins. A place where our curiosity pushes us to ask the hard questions, where our imagination fills in the silence, where our humanity tugs us towards the stories that refuse to die. Tonight we explored MH370, not to exploit the tragedy, not to sensationalize the heartbreak, but to understand why this disappearance has etched itself into the world's memory. We may never know what truly happened to MH370. Maybe the ocean swallowed the truth. Maybe technology failed. Maybe the answer lies in data we haven't yet learned to decode. But mysteries like these don't only reveal what we don't know, they reveal what we are. Curious, fragile, determined beings, searching for meaning in the quiet spaces of the world. As we close this episode, remember this. The world is not as small as we think. There are still corners untouched by our instruments, unseen by our satellites, unbroken by our certainty. MH370 vanished into one of those corners, and that is why it belongs here, on Where the Map Ends. I'm Jishnu Ganguly. Thank you for listening. Stay curious, stay awake, and join me for the next time as we explore another mystery waiting in the dark just beyond the edge of the map. Thank you.